welcome back to another episode of Awakened Reflections podcast. With me, I have a friend, a guest that I've been connected to for I'd say about half a year now on the platform Threads. It seems to be a commonality between these recent guests that have been on the show, and this guy is a prolific writer. I've been absorbing the endless amounts of content he's been sharing, nuggets of wisdom he's been sharing all across this platform, and it's really remarkable to see and watch the development of the writing skills and the passion and the love he has behind the craft. And I trust that during this episode, those people who listen and watch this will gain a nugget of wisdom that will change the way they look at things, change the way that they look at the world, change the way they look at themselves, their creativity, and I'm super excited. And that man is Carerra. Real name is Titus, but goes by the pen name Carerra. And yeah, man, how you feeling today? How you doing?
I'm good. I'm alive. I'm very stoked and happy to be here. Again, thanks for the invite, and let's see how this goes.
Yes, yes, always. I appreciate you wanting to be on. And so, something we talked about before we pressed record was the term polymaths. And I have a strong resonance with that term. Explain to me what your understanding of polymaths are and what do they do?
Sounds good. So, whenever I think about polymathy or polymaths in that matter, I think of two kinds of people. You have the polymath, as somebody we just described, and we have the generalist, so somebody who knows a lot of stuff in general, right? Okay. The difference between them is their level of expertise and the fields that they involve themselves in. So, a generalist is actually somebody I describe myself more right now because I'm so interested in a lot of things. I have a lot of fields which I want to go into. Could be tech, finance, personal development, leadership, careers, all that stuff. But I'm just starting out. I don't have that proven expertise yet. I don't have the proof on paper yet. The more I work on that proof, the more I can actually demonstrate my experience in those domains, is the closer I become to being a polymath, which answers your question. So, who's a polymath per se? They don't just know fields, they don't just know subjects or domains, they actually have deep expertise in it. Tim Ferriss describes it as the specialized generalist in a way, because even though they have a vast domain, they have depth in them, which I feel is a big difference between a polymath and generalist. And just to close this question is examples of polymaths, past and also present. Past, we could look at somebody like Leonardo da Vinci. We know him as a painter, but he was also a mathematician in a way, like me. He was also, I think, an architect. I want to guess he also did astronomy or something related to the stars or planets, something like that. You have Galileo Galilei, same kind of guy, a Renaissance man, somebody interested in cultivating knowledge, creating new theories, all that stuff back in the day. And then today you have, like we mentioned just before the call, Shaquille O'Neal, a bunch of enterprises, not just brand management, not just basketball, also restaurant chains, or say business domain, all that. Mark Cuban, also Elon, another example of polymaths. And hopefully one day I'll be there.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. And what purpose? So, what's the whole point of someone becoming a polymath? Why do you think people, like those people mentioned, want to learn and discover and go in depth into so many different things rather than here in the United States, of society, the programming, people want you to focus on one thing for your whole entire life. Like when we go throughout high school, they're like, okay, go to college. When you go to college, you're going to pick one major, and that is going to be the job and your whole entire life, basically, until you turn to the age of 65 and you retire, then you die. And a lot of people are really awakening up to that process. Just they're like, I don't want to live that life. That life seems absolutely terrible. And when I'm 18, I'm not going to know anything I'm going to want to be when I for the rest of my life. And it's like from the age of 18, looking on myself, because I went to college for one semester, then I dropped out due to all of this and a lot of other things. So it's like, and what's the whole point of someone wanting to become a polymath in society? What purpose does it serve to either them or to the grand scheme of the world?
Good question. The answer lies in two things: pursuing curiosity and seeking enterprise. The first one on curiosity is that it doesn't just pay to be curious about something, but you need to be actually chasing it, per se. Your intuition is going to spark some interest in you on this topic. I'm interested in sales, I'm interested in business, I'm interested in art, right? But by you developing that initial curiosity, you have to validate it by taking the action needed towards pursuing it and also fulfilling it, right? Which creates its own rabbit hole in the sense that the more you find out something, the more you realize you don't know much about it at all. Like, I forgot the concept it's called, per se. It's not Dunning Kruger, but the more you know, the more you realize you don't know about what you're supposed to know. And so it becomes this endless pursuit of pursuing curiosity in that sense. Okay. Enterprise, there are multiple definitions of enterprise. There's, say, starting a business, for example, starting a venture, per se. I think the Merriam-Webster has 4 or 5 definitions, but the definition I like most about it is the constant pursuit of adventure or endeavor that's greater than yourself, right? And it brings me back to a quote my dad mentioned 2, 3 months back, which I really love. Human beings were not made for slavery, but for enterprise, for that constant pursuit of something that's greater than yourself. That's fun, that's an adventure, that's something worth fulfilling, not just at the goal of it, but also in the journey of things, right? Okay, so to answer your question, why strive for polymathy in a way? You always constantly satisfying your curiosity. You're just gonna generate more curiosity about the thing you're curious about, which leads to this endless rabbit hole of not just learning but also implementation. And with enterprise, everybody has their own enterprise. Everybody has their own mission, their own north star in a way. And once you keep pursuing it, who knows the kind of person you're gonna evolve X years down the line, something like that.
Do you think everyone has a natural inclination to want to aspire to be a polymath?
I don't think so, off the top of my head. And there are many factors to this. It could be personal circumstances, personal background, their environment, whatever. There's some situations somebody's raised in and they're told stick to one thing for the rest of your life. And can't blame them because that's the status quo. There are some other situations. I want to believe, for example, China, they constantly tell you innovate, make the most out of whatever you have, and know that there's not just one solution to this, there's a myriad of them. So contextually, I would look at the environment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And for those people who aspire really want to be polymaths, what from your experience do you see as like the roadblocks? What stops people from aspiring to really go in depth and go really deep and do a lot of these great things?
Or are they gonna think about me?
Oh my gosh, they know me for A, but I want to do B and C and D. I really care about what they think until you realize that nobody's thinking about you at all. Everybody's too focused on themselves to even give a D about what you have to do, right? So you're better off starting all your divergent interests, knowing that at the beginning, and I say this from personal experience, nobody really is watching you. And once they realize what you're creating, more often than not, they're actually going to like it. Talk about your hidden potential, talk about the untapped part of self never revealed until you said, I'm going to walk my path. So people fear a lot about the opinions others are going to have in themselves until they realize there is never any cricket in the grass.
That seems to be also coming from the philosophy or understanding that we are separate from the other person rather than we are all one, if you believe or tend to agree with that statement. Um, what are some of those talents, abilities, skills that you would like to pursue down the path of becoming a master or an expert at? Share some fun things that you would like to go down towards.
I have hopefully cultivated an interest in a growth mindset, realizing that I'm never going to be a final product, but I'm going to be the product of the constant actions I'm always be taking. That's one. Two is I've made peace with the fact that alongside my growth mindset, I'm always going to be learning in life. So there's this phrase in Swahili that goes, Elimu ni bahari, literally translated, education is an ocean. It has no limits, it's lifelong. And so learning for life is definitely a good skill to have. Growth mindset, learning. That said, I want to endeavor into the fields that really interest me for the rest of my life, which we mentioned a bit before the call, I believe. Technology, there's finance, there's business, entrepreneurship, there's leadership, and maybe a subsect of careers and education, and also music, by the way, as you can tell from my babies are right here. Okay. That said, I'm gonna learn the basics. I'm gonna have to figure out first principles, like what should I know is fundamental to this field that I'm pursuing, right? If it's technology, okay, what's the definition of technology, right? Because technology back in the day, in terms of the type of it, is vastly contrasting to technology today. But still, if you're gonna tell me that you're a fisherman and you went to the ocean to fish using some harpoons or some fishing rods or even literally your hands, literally that's technology, right? As opposed to the boats we have today. So getting to the basics of it, learning that, and then learning pretty much current trends around technology. So for example, today you have AI, generative AI, you have blockchain, you have Web3, you have the cloud computing services, etc. And in my opinion, it's only going to get better from here, within reason, of course. Right. Emerging trends. And then number three in that subsect is where we are headed to the future. Right. We can make so many predictions and try many models, but to best predict the future, try to implement those models today. So whatever I learn about technology today, see if I can come up with something or create something that's going to impact generations to come, thinking way beyond myself. And note that that's just technology, right? That's one of my interests. I want to dive deep into finance, into education, into music with the same growth mindset and learning formula with first principles and then testing models and creating them till we see how it goes.
I just had a question that was going to be so good, and it just slipped my mind. Oh, that's a bummer. Let's see if I can call it back. Let's see if I can call it back. Oh, I got one. How much and how much are you familiar with Naval Ravikant, and how much has his life philosophies played a part in this whole life that you understand? Because it's like I before we hopped on a call, we talked about Tim Ferriss and Alex Ramosi, and those two guys are very well connected with coming back to Naval. And you talk about technology. There's another connection point out there. So I'm sensing that you know Naval very well. So it's like I'm already making the assumption. I'm not even going to ask you at this point. So it's like, what has Naval done for you in changing your life and the way that you see the world?
First off, I just watched Naval 15 minutes before the podcast. Or the odds. Okay. And then two is I read through his book, The Almanac, one of the best sellers out there. Free, by the way, off his website. Definitely worth a 10 times reread. So definitely for any reader out there, The Almanac by Naval Ravikant, that's a recommendation. Okay. So, what impact Naval has had for me is he has paved the way for the person I want to become. In the list of polymaths, it's safe to say that he categorizes as one because he started his career in mathematics and computer science. I think he did it Dartmouth, then did a little bit venture capitalism, technology based ADC, founded Angelus. I know he lobbied a few laws in Congress back in the 2010s, and sometime in the past decade got listed as the Angel Investor of the Year. It's around the time he also ventured into philosophy, and I was telling somebody this yesterday, so quoting Naval, that with this whole tech phase that he has, doing philosophy would seem weird to him because it would kind of like disrupt his brand. It'd make him look weird and whatnot. And he said, screw it, I'm just going to do it. And look what we have today. The Almanac of Naval really classifies on three aspects of life. You have health, you have wealth, and happiness. And he mentions in the book that happiness is derived mostly from his philosophy. And I'm of the school of thought that happiness is pretty much a choice. I don't know if you might realize that. So having $1 billion could be great monetarily, but personally, it's never gonna suffice unless you decide, okay, I'm happy now, as opposed to when I'm gonna be the Billy. But anyway, different story. So, having said all that, Naval definitely has his way of thinking. He definitely has his way of connecting the dots around the world. And I will say he also challenges himself in ways I want to myself because he's gonna read like hard books, like theoretical books. I think he has a book recommendation list of deep math, deep physics books, deep philosophy books, stuff from Nassim Taleb, who, as far as I know, can be controversial in some aspects. I don't know too much about him, but he really challenges himself. I know Ferris wrote his foreword in the book, and he mentioned that if you're not ready for an intellectual spar with Naval, just forget it. Because he's really going to challenge your ideas till they make valid sense to the both of you. Okay. And he is pragmatic in a way, he's practical. I feel like his advice is something he implements daily and sees what works for him, what doesn't. And he's seen it all. Like, he's had a great tech career, he's had a great undergrad, he has great philosophical thoughts and whatever, and practices them and preaches what he taught. So I'm not trying to praise him, just like give the facts. But that whole classifies Naval's influence on me. I'm definitely gonna read this book again, and God willing, if it ever happens, meet him in person and maybe have him on a podcast.
Yeah, what would be something that you would like to talk to him about? What questions do you have that? Well, you said you're gonna have to have a really strong mind to have like a conversation with him. What are some of those curiosities that you have that you would like to express with him in a conversation?
That's a good question. So I don't know if I'll ever get to a point of challenging his belief system in a way or challenging his thoughts in some sort of manner, because there's a part in the book he mentions something that's kind of atheistic. I'm not trying to convert people into religions or whatever, but he didn't really like the idea of a sovereign being that after we die, per se, we're going to get judged on the basis of good or wrong, which, depending on how attached somebody is to the religion, that could bring controversy to that. So I would probably steal his mind on that, like his thoughts on the afterlife. I think, and hopefully it's something true from the book, that he says after we die, like nothing happens, that sort of way. And the world is just got to keep revolving. I mean, it's been there for billions of years and got to exist for more billions of years. That I can agree with. But what happens in the afterlife or post death is something I'd like to steal his mind on. And so, number two, I would say, is pretty much his thoughts for the future. Of course, I don't know if I've watched enough podcasts to gauge his sentiments about it, but definitely something I'm looking forward to learning about his thoughts and per se, perceiving how technology is going these days, how the whole generative AI landscape is going these days, all aspects of even basically human life. I mean, we're talking about legit longevity being increased for the next, say, 20, 30 years. I'm pretty sure he has some vast thoughts on that. So if I'm ever going to have a cup of coffee within the next, say, 10, 15 years, it's something I definitely look forward to learn from him and maybe exchanging ideas on both.
Yeah. And coming back to the idea of polymaths, this is like my biggest struggle because I enjoy a lot of different things about life creatively and what you can classify as polymathy. Like dancing is a big part of my life. Video editing is a part of my life. Content creation, writing, speaking, reading books, sports. It's like musical instruments from time to time. Uh, there is something within me that's it's a calling. Like I can hear it. It's like I want to DJ for some reason. I never DJ'd, but something really wants me to do that within me. So it's like I'm very I'm pulled in so many different directions. How does a polymath or someone what's a suggested way of balancing it out? Like, is there like seasons where it's like, okay, I gotta put these desires to the side and just focus on one thing to get really good at it or to get something out of it? Or is there a way to incorporate daily sessions of balancing out these different interests and hobbies?
That's a fascinating question. And I also admit that that's a work in progress on my end, but definitely something I'm also looking forward to. My plan in that aspect is return to the first principles of whatever it is I want to do. So let's say writing. What is writing? Putting your thoughts on a communication medium. So writing a blog, that is still writing. Writing on paper, that is writing. Getting the first basics in. Good. Two is I look at the possibilities I can create from that endeavor. Okay, I have mastered the basics. I don't have 10,000 hours in, but I have a decent amount of experience to know, yes, I'm better than a beginner and close to intermediate. What are the possibilities that I can do with this? So, in our writing example, maybe writing the metaverse that could combine both media and technology. Maybe I could draft financial statements for a company. That's me being in investment management, wealth management, all that. Maybe that could be even, writing poetry if I want to do that. That is not just communication, but also art and creativity expressed in a different way. That summarizes the idea of how I'm gonna expand my basic interest into any domain or any field where it's applicable. And then number three, which I think is a huge saving grace for me, is being open minded to stuff that could happen along the way. Because, say, for example, that you had this goal for, in your case, now being a DJ, right? You're going to learn the basics. Again, this is how DJ does, this is Fruit Loops, this is a deck, all that stuff. Okay. In the process of it, you fall in love with audio engineering. So tuning the fine bits of audio in any sound system capacity. It doesn't have to be music, it could be also video editing per se. It could be also, say, shorts, YouTube shorts, Instagram reels, whatever. And just auto configuring the details of sound inside of it. Once you're open to that possibility, I see two things happening. First is specializing in that, or two, even returning to that loop of basics, fundamentals, and exploration with that. So, what started out with you wanting to be a DJ, which I see in a lot of many college applications, a totally different tangent, ends up being maybe somebody's part time life path. Oh, I wanted to be a DJ growing up, but I fell in love with musical engineering, and that's why I want to major in musical arts at so and so school, some of the sort. Being open minded to the tangents that the path can create. And then the last one, which I really like, is connecting the dots. Because as a polymath, you're going to have a whole systematized way of thinking that allows you to connect one domain to another domain. So in your case of, say, DJ, you're able to connect how being a disc jockey relates to audio engineering. You're gonna have to create a product, for example, along those lines, which is another dot connected to entrepreneurship and innovation, which is another product of personal development, because you being a DJ, you being an engineer, you being a entrepreneur are totally different aspects of yourself. They have to evolve, right? Different facets. That said, you're gonna be in a better spot to connect the dots between all your interests. But it doesn't start out until one, you gather the basics, two, explore possibilities, three, being open minded, and then four, connecting dots.
Yeah, it's like that. Everyone has a unique perspective from their specialized knowledge, and uh, and creating a product out of that, something no one can do because it's your unique story. And it's like what Naval also says, it's like the best way to live life is being able to be paid for your thinking. I'm like, that seems to be the best way to live life if I can get paid just for purely my thoughts and just sharing. I just seen that tweet recently, I think somewhere on X or Twitter, which I thought was really interesting because it's like that's what I aspire to have. Like it's like I don't want to slave away or hustle or do things that's meets a lot of resistance or force, and that's really what it comes down to, like the polymaths, because it's like they all seem to be essentially being paid for their thinking in a way, because the way that they think about the world, think about themselves, and think about all these different unique interests. What are some of those unique interests that you've connected dots that the typical normal person or majority of people haven't connected before between your interests?
Before I answer that question, I'm going to piggyback onto a sentiment you brought with Naval and payment. And I really like his quote: first, you're paid for what you do, but then eventually get paid for what you think, right? I butchered it, but something along the lines. And along those lines, literally just last week, I was scrolling through social media and found a similar quote. We don't know who it's attributed to. Even the guy who said it is actually Tristan, who mentioned it, Tristan Tate. He said, first, you're paid for what you do, then you're paid for what you know, and lastly, you're paid for who you are. So, what you do, what you know, who you are. I thought that was mind blowing, and we all eventually want to get paid for who we are as the people we are anyway. So, your question about some interests that I found fascinating that can be connected. Like, what's the question again?
Yeah, it's basically what you said. It's like, what are some of those personal interests that have been unique to you that you've connected dots between, like technology and writing and entrepreneurship? What are some of those ones that comes to mind that you've connected dots that most people haven't?
Obviously, my inherent brain is going to look forward to technology per se. And as vast as that field is, it's pretty broad. It's something that we have to, okay, get a huge scope in. Being more direct into it, something I'm looking personally into is Web3 per se, because as it's stated, and I wrote a blog about this, it's the democratization of the internet. Currently, Web2 as we are right now is we have a few tech companies and stakeholders who control 96% of the whole internet out there, which is crazy. With Web3, they say because it's built on blockchain and blockchain aims to decentralize technology as we know it and systems, same thing's going to happen to the internet, whereby everybody's going to have, for example, their own unique ID, unique way to access the internet. Their data is also going to be unique to them, because right now, this is eventually is going to go to YouTube, this podcast, right? We created it, but YouTube owns it.
Mm-hmm.
In Web3 is going to be like, Shaun, you're going to own this podcast per se. You have the 100% of royalties and rights to it, which should work in that contextual manner. Okay. And so with Web3 specifically, there's that freedom, there's that ownership, and there's also the transparency that comes to it per se, because everything's public, not interfere with, just public. We can see what's going on the public domain, unlike how you have, I think, 4% or 6% of the internet right now and 94% of the dark web, which is ridiculous to think about. So, how that relates in terms of connecting the dots is we as human beings, we're social creatures, right? You want to enjoy more time with each other, friends, family. That has changed over the past 20 years with the internet, and not as it was before, and never will it be the same again. But we'll still find a way on how we're going to connect. So in this manner, I'm looking at something like the metaverse, per se, whereby we're in a whole different universe, assuming we were in person, but still having that relationship between you and I, assuming we're having this podcast in person, but we're thousands of miles apart, something like that. Another thing I can imagine is with human beings, apart from being social, we are enterprise. Like we're enterprise driven, we are adventure seeking and purpose filling. And I think Web3 is going to create a whole new system for that just because we have 100% ownership of whatever we build on that interface, right? So you don't have to depend on anybody for, say, for example, sourcing data, sourcing information, for, say, even like trying to contact somebody else to do a freelance job from China because literally blockchain is the middleman in between you and I, right? I think it's gonna expedite personal resolve, enterprise. Everybody has more internet in their own power. And I don't want to be too brandish about it, but we're in the United States, we're privileged to be a leader in this field. It leads me to conclude that we're probably in the most innovative time of our lives yet. Forget going to the moon, forget flying cars. Like, we have so much innovation, we can't restrict ourselves to the status quo. 9 to 5 jobs per se, 5 days a week for 2 days freedom per se. And I think Web3, blockchain, and the whole internet as it's changing, it's probably gonna revolutionize all that.
It all seems to encompass from everything that we've talked about today so far. It all seems to come down to one word, and that one word is freedom. From Naval's lifestyle is to have freedom to do, be, and have whatever we want, all things, and also freedom from the suffering from our minds and from the ego. So it's like that's a good connection I've brought out from everything that we've talked about today. It's like freedom. What does freedom mean to you? How important is it to you as like a core value, and also as a life philosophy?
So at its basic term, I would define as freedom as doing whatever you want whenever you want with the people that you want to, right? Knowing that there are the consequences of the choices you make, per se. We are made to think that consequences are a bad thing, but they're good consequences, they're bad consequences. Either way, you get a return on investment or ROI from the choices you make, cause and effect. So that said, for me, I would say I'm also pursuing freedom in my case to continue doing what I'm doing in terms of sharing my thoughts, ideas, writing, as you said, venturing into the fields that I want to, personal development, leadership, finance, investing, etc. Go and make as many contributions I can with those in those fields with the least amount of obstacles I'm gonna face. Guaranteed, I'm still gonna face stuff, of course, but it shouldn't be something too hard for me not to accomplish per se. Right now, I'm just 24. I'm still figuring out the whole world to myself, and I have, I have so much to learn. I have so much to inculcate myself with, right? If I was a billionaire today, for example, I could have done all the things I wanted to and some change, but you also got to start from somewhere. So while I work towards myself or being, sorry, while I work towards that idea of freedom, I also have to create it within the stuff I do. You can't control anything, but you can control your outputs. You can control whatever you do, and slowly, in my belief, the actions I'm doing every day is slowly bringing me to that freedom of eventually what I want to do in the next X years.
Before I ask the last question, where can people go that is listening to this podcast, that is watching this podcast? Where would you like to guide people to help discover who you are, contact you, and to see who you are and what you do?
So I'm currently building my blog, carreraschronicles.com. Literally just my first name and then chronicles.com. Feel free over there. In the website, I'm also building my newsletter where I share my weekly ideas in less than a minute. Should be on the website or possibly in the description of this video. And then social media, you're gonna get me on Instagram per se. I am Carerra, so I.am.Carerra. LinkedIn, almost same name. I go by Titus Kariuki on LinkedIn, but you're still gonna get Carerra over there. So there's that. And then depending on how long this is gonna take, I should be having my podcast up now. If not, it'll be up sometime soon. Just go to my website again, Watuwangu, and once you sign up, I'll let you know when that goes up. But that's pretty much how you can access me.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And the last question that I didn't plan to ask every single guest I've interviewed so far on this new rebrand, but it just seems to be one of those things that just feels right. And so the question is, what is something deep down within you that you feel that humanity needs to hear? What is that message deep down that you would like to express to the world? Whether it's a message, whether it's a quote, whether it's an idea, what is that one thing that your heart is really asking you to express to the world?
That reminds me of a clip from a podcast Lewis had with Hormozy, and he said, "You've won everything in life. You have 5 minutes left to live. Your 3 words of wisdom." And I think Hormozy answered that brilliantly. So, in that sort of manner, I might do three. First is, given my spiritual background, do the will of God. Because you have something in your heart that's ringing you. You have something that is calling you to execute. They call it a conscience for a reason. That's the voice of God within you. In The Alchemist, they say the omens. They're whispering to you loudly, do this, do that. Of course, it's going to be hard to do it at first, but that's why you have faith. You don't know what's going to happen, but you know the outcome is going to be good. Take the leap of faith. You're never going to regret that. So, summarizing the first part, do the will of God. Second is, it pays to be optimistic. You and I can agree today that the world isn't the same place it was X years ago because of mass media, a lot of controversies, wars, natural calamities, and whatnot. But I choose to be a rational, pragmatic optimist because I believe there are good people in the world who can change it for the better. I haven't read the book, but it's called Outwitting the Devil, which is a sequel to Think and Grow Rich. And the idea in the book is that the devil uses fear to take over the world and castigates people for chasing their dreams. I'm not a huge proponent for fear because fear is the opposite of faith. Fear just means that you don't care about faith. Faith is the opposite of fear. You know the best outcome is going to happen for you. And that an idea I got from that book, even though I read like 5 pages because I got pissed off, is that 98% of the world is under massive fear right now. But it's being held by 2% of the world who are rapid faith optimists, like folks who really see the world for what it could be, and don't stop taking any drastic action to take it even better. To summarize that, it pays to be an optimist, not naive, optimist. See what could be and work towards that. Which leads to my last point, and I love saying this: the best is yet to come. It always gets better from here. If you believe that we have a great future to look forward to, the universe is going to say, sure, it's going to be a great life. It's going to be a great universe. If you choose to believe otherwise, the universe is going to be, okay, you have it. Suit yourself. Think about it that way. So, personally, as you can tell, I'm a massive optimist. I believe in the good that's there to come. I believe in the people that can make society greater than it is today. And that's why I always say the best is always yet to come, and it gets better from here.
Lovely. I love the way you broke it down into 3 different sections. And so thank you for sharing that wisdom. Thank you for wanting to be on this episode. And I am grateful and thankful to finally meet you, of course, but also to have this conversation and to see how our friendship goes from here. So, once again, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. God bless you, bro.